Good morning. Thank you for tuning into my show. This is the weekly show that I do. For those of you who haven't listened to me before, my name is Doug Zanes. I own a personal injury law firm in Arizona. We have offices in both Tucson and Phoenix, Arizona, and we're one of the largest personal injury firms in Arizona. And Today I want to talk to you about driving under the influence of either alcohol or drugs. And I'm going to talk about it, I think, in a general way, as opposed to very specific regarding Arizona law and punishments and all of those things, because every state's different. And because this is, a show that goes out on the internet and people listen to it from, various places. Not everybody's in Arizona. I don't want to get into that minutia. In addition to that, because every state's different. I mean, every state has different punishments. Every state has their own, minimum blood alcohol levels and all of those things. And so, but I want to talk about it in general, and I want to talk about it from an accident injury perspective, because that's what we do. We don't handle criminal defense cases. For years, I actually did do a lot of criminal defense work as I was building my law firm, but I probably stopped doing criminal defense work in about 2008. So it's been a long time since I've handled DUI cases, quite honestly. And so, I also don't want to get into minutia about the statutes and punishment, and to give you the wrong information as well. But what we see is the injury accident side of DUI cases, quite honestly, and that I know a lot about, and that's really what this conversation is about today. So let's start here. When a DUI accident occurs, the person who's been driving and who's under the influence, quite honestly, didn't get into their car expecting to run into somebody else and harm them or hurt them. That wasn't their intention. But unfortunately, that's what happens. And so, it's not, an intentional act isn't required in order to be held liable or quite honestly, in order to be convicted of a DUI. And so, it's a mistake, but the problem is it's an avoidable mistake that can cause significant harm. And so the goal is to simply avoid it. For starters these days, in addition to having taxi cabs, which have existed for forever, we have Uber, which I think is a fantastic thing, or Lyft, or some of these other companies where you actually get on your phone, get on an app, push a couple buttons, and a driver shows up and picks you up and takes you home. And in the grand scheme of things, it's quite honestly extremely affordable. In this day and age, with taxis, with car services, with Uber, with Lyft, quite honestly, there's no reason to make that mistake. There just isn't. I can tell you flat out, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but it's really just unacceptable, to go out, drink too much, or be under the influence of some sort of substance and choose to drive home, just so your car is sitting in your driveway the next morning. And quite honestly, every city's different, but I can tell you here in Tucson, there's actually a company that will come out and pick you up, and they come out in these little electric scooters. They come out, the scooter actually folds up, they put it into a big bag, they put it into the trunk of your car, and they drive you home in your car. Then they pull their scooter out, unfold it, start it up, and leave. So you, again, don't have to drive, and you have your car sitting in your driveway in the morning. I believe the name of that company is Entourage here in Tucson. Now, again, different cities have different services available, but there's no excuse for driving under the influence these days and hurting somebody, or quite frankly, hurting yourself horrifically. There's just no excuse. Let me tell you about a couple of cases we've had in the past over the years that have involved people driving under the influence. One case involves, we represented a young man who was a passenger in a vehicle with a friend of his. They were in their early 20s. They'd been out going from party to party, bar to bar. Both of them had been drinking. So our client had been drinking along with his friend. He knew his friend had been drinking. And he chose to continue to get in the car with his friend who was driving under the influence. That was a choice that our client made. And so it's about 1:30, 2 in the morning. They're driving down a road here in Arizona. The driver loses control of the vehicle. It goes flying off the road into the desert. And our client gets ejected from the vehicle as it rolls over. And is ejected and launched out into the desert somewhere. His friend who was driving actually ended up still within the vehicle and was banged up a little bit, but with no significant injuries. And believe it or not, his friend climbed out of the vehicle, knew that his buddy, who ultimately became our client, wasn't in the vehicle. So he must have been ejected. And instead of calling the police, instead of trying to get help for his friend, instead of even trying to find his friend, he just walked away. Started walking down the road, got about half a mile or so down the road. Somebody else was driving home, happened to see him, thought it was a little strange, middle of the night, pulled over to see if he needed help. Noticed that he was bloody a little bit, banged up, really dirty, because again, the vehicle rolled off into the desert. Asked him if he needed help, asked him if he needed to go to the hospital. He said no, he just wanted to go home. Said absolutely nothing about needing help or calling the police or getting help for his friend. And this passerby thought this was a little strange, and he just happened by chance to see an off-duty sheriff's deputy driving home in his sheriff's vehicle and flagged him down. The police officer stopped, started to talk to this guy. Again, he said absolutely nothing about the crash, said absolutely nothing about his friend, and essentially made the police get a helicopter up in the sky in order to find a heat signature for his friend, meaning the heat coming off of his body so they could locate his friend in the desert in order to help him. And once all of this process started, the driver who walked away from the accident stuck to his story, and his story was he was not driving, his friend was driving, so he didn't do anything wrong. And he stuck to that story. And we had to fight, and we had to fight, and we had to fight for a number of years on behalf of our client in litigation where we sued everybody and hired experts, accident reconstructionists, biomechanics, in order to prove that the accident happened the way that we said it happened, the way that our client said it happened, in order to make the insurance carrier pay, because our client was severely injured. Fortunately, he survived, but he was severely injured. Believe it or not, those things happen every day. So as you're sort of evaluating what decisions you're going to make when you're out just having a good time, keep that in mind. I mean, unfortunately, even friends, when you need them most, don't step up and do what they should do. Another perfect example of a case we've had over the years, a minor client, actually even under the age of 18. I think the client was about 17 years old. Passenger in a vehicle with somebody who's over 21. This person who was over 21 had taken our client to a party. The party actually served alcohol to everybody, including our client who was under 21, which in Arizona creates social host liability. Meaning if you have a party and everybody at your party is over the age of 21 and they drink and somebody drinks too much, drives and hurts somebody, in Arizona, you're not liable. In other states, you may be. I have no idea. But in Arizona, you're not responsible as the homeowner who had the party. As long as the person is over the age of 21. If they're under the age of 21, and when I say 21, that's the legal drinking age in Arizona. And again, as I started this, I talked about talking in generalities because other states have different drinking ages other than 21, from what I understand. But in Arizona, it's 21. So if you're under 21, you go to a party somewhere and you're served alcohol anywhere, whether it's at a house is what we're talking about, and you're served alcohol, that homeowner is now 100% responsible for any injuries or harm that you cause if you then go drive drunk and hurt somebody because you shouldn't have been drinking. You're under the age of 21. And that was this case. And so our client's a passenger in a vehicle after the party with the person they'd gone with. This person gets into a single vehicle accident. Again, we see it all the time with people driving under the influence. Our client gets severely hurt. The driver, quite honestly, she's not really hurt much at all, but our client gets severely hurt. And ultimately, where we go to really get our client compensated, because there's only a certain amount of auto insurance, is to the homeowner's policy on the house where the party was held at. Because our client was under the age of 21 and was served alcohol and should not have been. And even though our client wasn't driving, our perspective is, from a legal basis, or our perspective was, I should say, that had our client not been served alcohol and been under the influence of alcohol, our client would not have chosen to get into the vehicle with this person who was over the age of 21 who had drank too much. Keep in mind, if you own a house and you're serving alcohol, that's a very, very important piece, is everybody needs to be over the age of 21. I can tell you story after story after story about about cases that we see where our clients are harmed by somebody who's driving drunk. I've just given you two examples of single vehicle accidents where our clients had been drinking as well, and their decision making, quite frankly, was impaired. And unfortunately, it came back and they were hurt because of the choices that they made. But I can also tell you story after story of our clients who were, for lack of a better way to put it, 100% completely innocent, hadn't been drinking, just driving along in their car or walking along down the street or riding their bike along down the road. And some drunk person ran into them, or some person who was under the influence of drugs, whether it was prescription medication, whether it was illegal substances, ran into them and hurt them. It happens way too often. And so if you are going out to have a good time and you're going to drink, it's not a big deal. It's America. If you're of age, you're perfectly allowed to do that. Just do it responsibly. Make sure, not only the general public is protected, but quite honestly, that you get home safely. If nothing else, do it for that reason. So you get home safely and can wake up tomorrow and have another fantastic day. Because we see clients, just like I've told you in those two stories, who get hurt because of the choices that they make in conjunction with drinking and somebody else who has been drinking. So this is about you getting home safely too. Remember, if you get behind the wheel under the influence, even though the accident's your fault and it should never happen, and you run a red light and hurt somebody, you may get hurt too. You could kill yourself. So just do the responsible thing. I know you hear it 1,000 times a day, but it doesn't always stick. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight, tell you a couple stories, and hopefully those things resonate with you and help it stick.